My name is Kieran Fagan, so I get to introduce myself to all of you now. I work for a firm called WCG. I've been there about 3 years. We are what today is called an integrated communications company. My background is more in corporate communications, issues management, crisis communications, and I hadn't worked for an agency before. I worked in healthcare and financial services. We are about 400 people strong now, offices New York, San Francisco, Austin, Texas mainly, a group of people in Austin. But we've got, of those 400, about 15% now are getting into data and data analytics. We've gone beyond just hiring only liberal arts majors, which I'm one. I'm not knocking liberal arts majors, but hiring liberal arts majors to do data, and now we've got actual bona fide, real dyed-in-the-wool data scientists working here, and we're not unusual. This is a trend that, of course, how many of you are on the agency side, whether marketing, communications, anywhere else? Quite a few of you. So it's not unusual, but what I've seen in my 3 years there is just this shift towards people like me who are not data people. I'm a client partner person, and my background was communications, some marketing, media relations. But people like me having to get smarter about data and how to use it more. What we're going to talk about today, though, is some of the work we've done and some specific case studies. We work across healthcare. We started as a healthcare company primarily, and that was my background. But since then, we've expanded. So we're doing a lot of consumer, we're doing a lot of tech, and increasingly, we won't talk about it much today, but we're getting into policy in the political realm as well. Because we find a lot of what we do, a lot of the way we're looking for influencers and for what works in terms of engaging influencers really carries across the board. A lot of those lessons marketers just kind of get. Marketers are people who are used to data and working with data and doing something with it. I think when you work in the policy sphere, even with some PR, communications, media relations, they're a little bit newer to it. But again, a lot of these models and a lot of the things we'll talk about, and I think a lot of what Nate talked about as well, goes beyond that marketing spectrum. What we're also seeing, and I'm sure many of you are, we're seeing a big shift in the communications mix. Is it marketing? Is it PR? Is it advertising? Is it corporate communications? Within corporate communications, is it internal? Is it external? Everything is shifting quite a bit. I think a lot of corporate comms folks are seeing a lot of what they're doing is traditionally thought of as more marketing. A lot of marketing people, a lot of what they're doing now is earned media, and which is more traditionally PR. So there's a lot of blurring. Is that a fair statement? Raise your hand if you agree with that, or throw something at me if you don't. But I think it's, again, something we've seen again and again. So what I'll talk about today in the case studies and the examples and the models, stop me if something doesn't sound right or isn't clear. We'll make it nice and interactive. But I'd like to start with some basic principles. How many people have heard of what's called the 1-9-90 rule or the 1% rule? This is something that came around maybe about 10 years ago or so when it really started taking off. A person often credited with this is Jakob Nielsen, whom a lot of you would know. He's a usability expert, online usability expert. And it was measuring the amount of participation with new media, with the internet. And we've seen this apply, and the percentages are not exact, but it really makes the point. Seen this apply in terms of who's influential online, how content is shared online, how memes and messages spread online. And it breaks down along these lines. So you've got your influencers who are the 1%. These are the people, a lot of the folks Nate was talking about, who on a specific topic, and that was a great point, by the way, which we'll talk about a little bit more too, in a specific field for a specific brand, these are the people who are most influential. They are driving the vast majority of conversation and brand awareness online. And you've got the 9%, and again, allow a little bit on either side for the percentages based on the issue, but you've got the 9% who are advocates. So these are people who, they may not be as active in terms of creating content or really getting the visibility. They're maybe not writing for national media outlets, but these are people who are really advocating for a brand, for an issue, for a topic, and sharing a lot of this content, maybe generating a little bit of their own. This 9% has probably increased in recent years with the ready availability of social platforms and more people participating in them. But again, given somewhat wide ranges here, it's still a fairly small amount. And then you've got everybody else. You've got what we call the enthusiasts. So the 1%, these are the ones who are really shaping the conversation. Advocates, these are the people who are taking a lot of that, digesting it, further sharing it. So they're quite influential on their own. And everybody else, the enthusiasts. These are the people who are, again, lurking, learning, they're digesting what's out there. They may not be actively moving a lot around. I think, again, with the rise of Facebook and other channels, a lot of these 90% who would have been enthusiasts years ago are shifting into the advocate range because it's easier for them to do so. But still, they're not that active, but they're the people ultimately you want to get to. But to get back to all this, we asked the question, and Nate answered a lot of this as well, but what is influence? I've shown this to younger audiences, and I am dismayed when I say, does everyone know who this is? And a lot of hands don't go up. I'm just going to assume people know who this is, and if not, we'll talk about it in a moment. But Jimi Hendrix is influential. That's Jimi Hendrix. He's a pretty famous guitar player who's sadly no longer with us. But when we talk about influence, I like to explain it in these terms. I am a quasi-guitarist. I make noise with a guitar, not quite a musician. But I do love great guitar and great guitarists. So when I think of influence, and this is lifted from a model that we use, I think of Jimi Hendrix. He's iconic. He's got outsized influence when it comes to guitar playing and innovating on guitar and really influencing a lot of other people. But when we talk about influencers, we're not talking about them in a vacuum. We're talking about them in the world of influence they live in, aka the real world. And then we talk about people on the left side of the slide here. Who's influencing them? In Jimi Hendrix's case, I didn't make these up. And I would give you huge bonus points if you can name every guitarist on this slide. I won't put anyone to it, but we'll go through them. For those of you keeping score at home. I read an interview in Rolling Stone in putting this together, and he actually named these people, who I wouldn't necessarily have named. From the top on the left, we've got Muddy Waters, Buddy Holly, Albert King, and Eddie Cochran. These are guitarists. I don't know how many of you are really into the guitar, but that's not really the point of the slide. They're guitarists of varying styles, varying backgrounds, but they all influenced Jimi Hendrix. He took different things from them. You know, from Eddie Cochran, he might have gotten the kind of the shuffle picking style. From Albert King, he got this squealing, high notes, blues riffs. So he put all that together into his own style. He, in turn, as we all know, influenced thousands and thousands of guitarists, some of them very influential in their own right. And on the right side, we have probably some more familiar people. Stevie Ray Vaughan from the top, John Frusciante from Red Hot Chili Peppers. We've got Prince, who, by the way, is an incredible guitarist and not often known for that, and Eddie Van Halen. Again, people who have said time and again, Jimi Hendrix was a tremendous influence on me. What's the point here? It's that, again, influencers don't exist in a vacuum. They're not influential on only one topic. When you see the circle around Jimmy, and we made this up for the sake of example, but he's influential in certain ways. What we chose here was blues riffs, squeal, chord voicings, and speed. These are four things that he was very well known for among dozens of others. And you'd see a representative share of how influential, how outsized, or the amount of influence he has in each of those areas. Now we've got the mere mortals example, and this is, again, something we use to measure influence, and we won't belabor this, but the point here is, and this was an actual work we had done, I think, on a healthcare project, the person in the middle is our influencer. And we found this person through a variety of tools and analytics methods and algorithms of finding who is most influential on topic X or on brand X. I think in this case it was actually a pharmaceutical brand. But we didn't want to stop at who is this person who's influential, because what often happens, you know a lot of these influential people, and then you find people who are influential that you can't necessarily get to for various reasons. They're too big, or they're too remote, or they're maybe not that friendly to your clients. So then you want to expand out and say, who's influencing these people? So to find that, there's a bunch of things you can do. One thing we do, though, is if you take John Q. Influencer here, these are real people whose names we've either left out or changed to protect the innocent. But if you take John Q. Influence as an example, what we found with him is he is influential on various issues. You see the issues circling around him. You want to understand his relevance to your issue. So if you've got a brand, a consumer tech brand, for example, you want someone who's influential in consumer tech, but if it's a new Blu-ray player, you don't want to find someone who's influential in iPads. So just to use a specific example. What often finds is you get that list, and people say, oh, I know that guy. I had no idea he's not talking about my brands. I had no idea he's not even interested in talking about those brands. So you take a year's worth of content or 2 years of content of that person, and you could divine all this. What you can also divine is who this person is influenced by. And you do that through a very simple way of pulling out all the links that they had. So if John Q. Influencer is writing 5 blog posts a week, and he's linking, and he's a prolific linker, he's got a high linklyhood, we like to call it, then you can find out what are the top 10 media outlets, what are the top 10 bloggers he's been linking back to. This is pretty simple. These people are not consciously linking, oh, I'm going to link to this person 5 times next week, and then they're not doing that. These are just people they go back to again and again and again. And if you ask them who influences you, they may or may not name this list of 10 that you have in your back pocket. They'd probably name some of them. They say, oh, well, yeah, I really am. I'm a fan of this site, and I read this person. But they wouldn't know all of them. So by simply pulling the links, and it's a lot of manual pull, but by simply pulling the links of their content for a year, for example, you could find out more about their world of influence. And then you take it on the other side and find out who are they influencing. So it kind of expands out your understanding of not just how this person is influential and how relevant this person is to your brand or your issue or your topic, but also who else is in their world of influence. This is a nod to Forrester. This is not new information, but it makes a great point. And that is, again, when you look at 1990, you see these sort of ratios again and again. You've got about 6% of the influencers on a given topic with an outsized influence on the number of impressions that are made about a brand or an issue. But, and I'm not going to pick on any individual channel here, there are 2.4 billion people now participating in shared media online. So you've got these influencers, and they're great writers, and they're influential. They've got big reach. They've got great content. Not everybody is reading them. You've got 2.4 billion people out there. They're not being shared by everybody. No one's going to be, of course. In the US, most people on social media are reaching 133 of their friends. It's not bad. It's an average. But again, if I'm John Q. Influencer, and I'm trying to get to John Q. Influencer, and I'm trying to get him to get people to share things, you've got a little bit of a backlog there. The average person's news feed, picking on Facebook only for example, it has 1,500 potential content updates every day, which means if you're lucky, about 17% of your updates will appear in news feeds. So you've got influence, and then you're trying to get it out there, and it's hitting this very narrow straw, really, that is kind of holding things up. And of course, Facebook is just one site among many. There's a lot you can choose from. This is an ugly slide which makes a point about everything, every channel out there that you could potentially get into. And when we talk about this, it's not to say you've got to be everywhere. That would not be possible. But you have to consider these. Podcasts are really not dead. I think again and again, when we think they're going to go away, for the right brand, for the right topic, for the right company, and for the right audience, of course, podcasts can be the right thing. But anyway, the point here, it's audio, it's blogs, it's SlideShare and other slide sites, it's forums, it's social sites like Facebook, it's Twitter. It's not just these single channels. So when you're getting into a program and when you're trying to understand influence and then the channels to get out to, you've got to keep in mind the whole picture. Then you'll narrow down from there. We'll talk a little bit about that. With all this out there, how do you actually break through? Well, this slide originally said content is king. I thought, wouldn't that be a revelation if I stood in front of a group of people here in New York City, marketers, and told them content is king? They would say, wow, you are a genius. Content is still king, and now we call it content marketing. We'll call it something else in another 2 or 3 years. But it comes back to the importance, a lot what Nate was saying as well. This is the stuff you need to get out to the influencers, to be seen, to be heard, to get people engaged with you. The trouble with content is, and we'll go into this, traditionally it's been all about fireworks. So what we're talking about now, and here's a question. How many of you have been to fireworks in the last couple of years? Okay, hasn't changed much, so you know, whether it was the last couple of years or 20 years ago, it doesn't really matter. What do you do at a fireworks show? Spread out your blanket, put your chair down. Where do you look? You look up. Are you looking at anyone to the side? No, you can hear them. Ooh, ah. But you're looking up. It's splashy, it's expensive, it's big, it's loud, and then it's over. And then you go home. Roll up your blanket, you go home. So we're talking less fireworks. I know that's grammatically bad. Should be fewer fireworks, but less fireworks sounds better. More bonfires. How many of you have been to a bonfire in the last year? A handful of people. Not a lot of people go to bonfires anymore. I love bonfires. I've got a sister who lives upstate. She's on 6 acres. We do bonfires every Thanksgiving up there. Can't do it where I live in New Jersey because they would have me arrested because it's fairly small and houses are close together and made of wood. But at a bonfire, it's a very different experience. So you said you were at a bonfire in the past year. What do you do at a bonfire? You talk to each other. And you drink beer. And you throw logs on the fire, and you stick around a while, and you're not looking up and oohing and ahhing. It's a lot lower key. It's a lot more human. Not that fireworks are inhuman. I mean, although they are replicated explosions from war. That's how that pretty much all got started. But that's another story. Bonfires are a real engaging experience. Bonfires are somewhere where people want to stay longer. Bonfires are somewhere where you can meet someone. You could probably get a date at a bonfire. I don't know fireworks shows are really the best place to meet someone. Maybe, I'm sure it's happened. But bonfires are really these two-way, interactive, very human, engaging experiences. So again, it's not about that when it comes to getting out there and getting people to pay attention to you. It's much more about this. How do you create this? Well, now we go from a lovely bonfire to a pretty ugly chart on two sides of a slide. But the point here is it's not just about paid media. Paid media is the boom, expensive fireworks. It's very bright, it's flashy. We're not saying it goes away. We're not saying it should go away. It's still got an integral role in any plan. What we're saying is it can't just be about that anymore. Because the model on the left, we're saying you spend, you spend, you spend, your campaign goes, and it can go up to infinity. When you're looking at integrated media, which is what Nate was talking about as well, we didn't rehearse this, by the way, but a lot of what he was talking about, we'll talk about as well here. When you're talking about integrated media, you're looking across beyond paid. It's not just paid, still extremely important. You're looking at earned, you're looking at shared, you're looking at owned. PESO model, we call it. We said it could be PESO, it could be SOAP, it could be ESOP. PESO seemed to work out to be the best pronunciation and arrangement of those letters. But in the integrated model, you're actually seeing the value go up across your other channels as the value of paid starts to go down. But paid is a great way to get things going, to keep them going, to ramp it up again. We work a little bit with these folks. And what you want to do is make sure your content is fully integrated across. So how do you get across paid, earned, shared, owned? It goes back to user experience. Is the person having the same, whether they find you on Facebook or whether they see your commercial on TV, and these, we don't do advertising for them, by the way, but they've got some great TV commercials. However they're finding you, they're having a similar experience, and that's across your channels. And they can engage with you where they want. We've done a little bit, we've actually got someone who works with us now who worked quite a bit with these folks on Old Spice. Got some examples that we didn't work for either, but this is one where we really saw the paid and earned really helped the shared and owned. So you start off with your paid earned. How many people have seen this guy before? That was, again, these are not parts of it that we did at all, but you see him in USA Today, he's on television. These are some really engaging, interesting ads. Then it moves over to YouTube. So you've got your shared and you've got your owned because they've got their YouTube channel. Then they're on Twitter, sending it out there. You've got over 1 trillion impressions generated by your customers and influencers out there. You've got 1.5 billion generated by the brand itself across the channels. So this is nothing new. I mean, this is integrated marketing, it's integrated communications, a lot of ways to look at it. But I think, again, what we're often seeing is that people will get stuck on maybe a couple areas here. Say, well, we're going to move everything to social. That may work for some things, that may work for some brands, that may work for some campaigns, but typically it's not going to. You're going to be stuck. You want to find people somewhere else where they When you talk about fireworks versus bonfires in the real world, you talk about, you can turn it again into pretty ugly charts, but this chart tells a fairly interesting story. There's an actual listening that we performed for a brand, and the big spike you see there is usually where a lot of this ends. And we've seen this, by the way, on the marketing side as well as on the PR side and even in communication side. An event happens, something happens. You do something. In this case, it was a paid campaign, I believe, but I'm not even sure the details on this anymore. This was about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago. But the point of this is to say you got your fireworks, and that's great. The fireworks get attention. They're flashy, they're important, they're festive, people like them. But then what happens after the fireworks? Typically what you see is they'll drop off and maybe not quite flatline, but there's just nothing to follow it up. You kind of rolled the dice, you put all the chips down on the fireworks and crossed your fingers and hoped, well, it's just going to carry through. So what you can be doing after the fireworks show is have a bonfire. And you can have a bonfire in your earned media. You can have a bonfire in your owned channels on your website. You can have a bonfire inviting people to it so they can share their stories. They can share your story. So if you've got the fireworks show, just plan for the bonfire afterwards to keep it going. We're going to go through a couple ways now to get out to influencers and advocates and a little bit on enthusiasts. But first I want to talk about 4 different types. And this is what we've seen, there are probably 8 different types, but if you're really going to condense them into certain archetypes, this is what we've seen time and again. You got what we call the evolved celebrities. So these are folks, the question came up earlier about paid sponsorship. A lot of times these people are asking for paid sponsorship. They know they've got the reach, they know they've got the relevance, they know they're the person, they're the guy or the gal who can really help you get what you want. By the way, I'm not here to recommend that they're the ones you want to talk to. It's the last one that is going to be your best friend, typically. You've then got traditional journalists. They're writing for top-tier outlets, very well known. Most of their influence, maybe not all, but a lot of their influence is coming from the outlet itself. It's not a bad thing. You all know David Pogue, highly influential. He was arguably, and probably could be argued, but he was arguably influential in large part because of the New York Times, for which he wrote for, I don't know, was it 7 or 8 for years. It was for a while. So now he's moved on. He's going to Yahoo. He's built that cachet. Very influential guy, and he's got other properties too. He's on PBS. He's got a bunch of stuff going, a lot of irons in the fire. Smart guy, engaging guy, entertaining guy, but a lot of his influence, 6 years ago, he wouldn't have gone to Yahoo because he wouldn't have been that interesting or influential. So the outlet really did help him. Also helps that he's extremely talented and prolific and has the energy to do all these things all the time. But again, he was a more traditional journalist, and you still find plenty of these folks. Anyone in the room who does actual media relations, we've got a handful of people. So these would be what we call the usual suspects. So if you go out and do a scrape on who your influencers are, they're the people you would expect to see on the list. The top tier new media, these could be the bloggers, hobbyists, it could be Joe Sixpack, it could be the guy who Nate showed earlier, who was doing Penny Arcade. These are not professional journalists. These are people who are really passionate about a certain thing. I work with a guy who had done work with GM years ago, actually worked at GM years ago. And the story of the Chevy Volt he likes to talk about is when they first started developing the Volt, they wanted to find out people who were really interested in electric cars. So they went to Car and Driver, all the usual suspects. Of course, these people are influential. Of course, you want to talk to them. But what they found was there was a guy up in New Rochelle, New York, a dentist, in fact, who was really passionate about electric cars. I think he had that first one that Chevy had made a while back, and then those all got taken away. But anyway, this was a guy who started a blog and was talking about, a dentist who started a blog about electric cars and was talking about them a lot. And was a good writer and was engaging and funny. So they engaged him in this, and he was one of their biggest advocates. He's also the guy who got the first Chevy Volt delivered in the US. So talk about how to treat your influencers special. That's not a bad way to do it. I do think he bought it, but he got it at a discount and he was first. Then your up-and-comer new media. So again, there's people out there who are under the radar right now, passionate about the topic, passionate about the brand, about the product. They just haven't been seen yet. They don't have the cachet. Maybe they haven't been doing it that long. Maybe they haven't hooked up with a larger media outlet. They just haven't gotten noticed. But they're out there too. These people in many ways can be your best friends, again, depending on what the brand is going to be. But these are people who are hungry to be noticed. Because influencers are people. They like to be noticed. They like it when someone says, hey, we like what you're doing there. Would you mind taking a look at what we've got? Would you come talk to us? Or, hey, have you met these people over here? They love that. Who doesn't? Penny Arcade guy that Nate was talking about earlier. Again, is he going to be won over? Is he going to suddenly become Microsoft's #1 salesperson? No, that's not the point. The point is, here's a guy who has it in him to do this, who has it in him just to talk about these things. Go shake his hand. Go meet him. I'll even beat the bonfire analogy to death. Invite him to a bonfire. 4 ways to reach and activate influencers and advocates. And again, there's some crossover with what Nate was talking about in terms of what we've seen works here. So you've got people, your top influencers. This is the dentist up in New Rochelle talking about electric cars. Treat him special somehow. Find out who he is. Treat him special. Treat him like top-tier media. Treat him like he's the guy writing for Car and Driver. And he can help you that way, and he'll love it. Again, he's not going to become your #1 salesperson. That's not the point. The point is to say, hey, we like what you're doing. Would you mind checking us out? Personal sharebait. Sharebait is not a term I love, but it works. Sharebait is, what can you give these people that you know they're going to share? And we'll have a few examples in a second. Infographics, that kind of thing. But stuff you know people just like. Doesn't cost a lot for you to create. Campaign pitching. So those of you who do media relations or in marketing as well, when you go to pitch a campaign, are you packaging it the right way? Now that you know who your influencers are and what you're trying to get done, are you going in the right swim lanes to get to that point? And we'll talk about that as well. And then this one works for pretty much any human being, but it works for influencers, it works for those advocates, those 9% as well. And that's the 3 R's: recognition, respect, relationships. Just treat them like people. Top influencer program. Again, these are some ideas of what you can do. And the value to the person who is your influencer, and the value to you and your brand. So things like getting the information and news first. That's pretty easy. That is 0 cost involved. It's, hey, we just wanted you to know this is going to be coming out on this date. And then, walk away, depending on the relationship you have, and say, would you consider writing? It's good old media pitching, but you're going to people who, and this is important, you're going to a lot of people in this case, particularly those new media, the bloggers, particularly the up-and-comers. They're not used to this. And they might fall over them. Oh, my God, I'll say everything about it. Say, whoa, that's okay. So you also want to train them a little bit, subtly. I mean, it's just kind of, hey, we're not asking you to do much here. Just check it out and see what you think. They'll figure that out. But sometimes we've seen people get really, really excited about stuff, and then if it comes across, they almost change their style, is what I'm saying. I don't know if anyone's seen this happen, but you get someone who's new to it, who's suddenly been recognized by a big brand, and they collapse with excitement and joy, and understandably. I mean, this is a big deal. Here I am sitting at home in my kitchen writing about refrigerators, and Maytag comes to me and says, hey, do you want to check out some of our new refrigerators? I might fall off my chair. I'm not that excited about refrigerators, but you get my point. Personalized sharebait. So again, this is where you do make it personal. Recognize them as a person. Get to know what they like, which you can pretty well get to know by reading their blog, checking out their videos, however they're sharing content. And you make something personal for them. In this case, the avatar you see there was something we'd actually made for a blogger. This was a mommy blogger, and I'm forgetting exactly what it was for, but it's for a consumer product. We'll leave it at that. But this was actually handmade, is it macrame or paper mache? I don't know what it is. But anyway, it was an avatar made of her that was mailed to her to say, thank you, really appreciate everything you're doing to talk about us. What you see on the far right, this is a list of influencers. Again, when we go through, what I showed earlier in terms of identifying influencers. Funny thing is, a lot of times people don't know that they're influencers, particularly, as we said, the new up-and-comers. So we tell them, we do a top 10 list. You know, we ran an algorithm, you're an outsized influencer on this topic. I think we've got Andrew Weil in there. He knows he's an influencer on healthcare topics. But we had a handful of people who we'd never heard of. They were not aware they were influencers. You send that to them and say, hey, congrats, you're part of the top 10. We love what you're doing. And that was it. These people loved it. I said, my God, I'm on a list with Andrew Weil. This is great. I had no idea. And they start to feel pretty good about what they're doing, sitting at the kitchen table doing what they're doing. And they really, you know, they've been recognized. They've been respected. Someone has reached out to them and said, good stuff, check it out. And then you can go back again and say, just thought you'd want to see this. And we do those from time to time. They're really a great way to make friends with people too. Because you're going to them with, it's fairly neutral data. You're not saying, hey, we think you're great and want you to talk about us. We're saying, we ran an algorithm and you're in here. You're on this list. Did you know you have this much influence on this topic? And they get a kick out of it. They like it. But again, here are some other ways. These are low cost, pretty easy. You need the person behind it, though. You need the people who can do it. You need the people to do the outreach, of course. Community managers or whatnot. We'll talk a little bit about organization in a minute. Campaign pitching. Again, this is nothing new. It's been around forever. But what this starts to tell you is, are you talking to them in the way they want to be talked to? That comes with the package. You know, you got the 4 Ps, and we've all heard of these before. But when you're packaging what it is you have to sell, are you putting it in the right way, or are you just trying to go out with the spray and pray? Just put it out there, cross our fingers, and hope everyone that we think is going to love this is going to love it. Or do you want to break it down more finely? And you can do this. If you go back to the Jimi Hendrix circle or the other circle we showed, look for the relevance. Look for the people who really care about this. Just because they're writing tech for the Wall Street Journal doesn't mean they care about what you've got for your client, you know, this tech product. So find that out and then package it the right way. There may be an aspect of that they're really into. Maybe it's and I'll say it again, it's a Blu-ray player, but it's got a really cool audio component to it, and maybe that's what they want to talk about. Go to them that way. This stuff is nothing new. It's really getting to know these people and getting to know what really makes them tick, but we just got better tools to do it now. And number 4, this is the recognition, respect. This works for influencers, works for advocates. It works for the 90%, because there may be people out there who are sharing things here and there. And you've seen it again and again. We had the Radisson example earlier. That's great. You notice someone saying a nice thing about your product, go back to them, say thanks. Hey, here's a coupon, or thought you'd enjoy this. Fairly low-cost, shareable ways of getting your message out there. Now, the enthusiast, this is everybody else. So this is where we come back to content. I found this, the part on the right there, it's like a blinding flash of the obvious, I guess. And I love headlines. Content vaults to #1 marketing priority for 2013. #1 priority. Was content ever a low priority? Was the thing you're going to say about the product and try to get people to pay attention to it, or what you're saying about it? I don't know that it was low. And content, again, it's nothing new. Content marketing is not really that new. But who owns it? And this question came up earlier. Well, who's going to own the piece of this in the organizations? How many of you are working non-agency side, but more inside companies now? And are you having these discussions over who's got, and it's a tug of war, and it's again, depending on what it is you've got, I see a piece of that for everyone. And again, I worked with marketers. I have done some marketing in the past, but my background was more media relations, corporate communications, crisis, that kind of thing. I've seen it shift to the point, in the organizations we work with, large and small, you see this as a real shared responsibility. Marketers still are going to lead in a lot of ways, particularly on brand and product, but you're going to want to bring in other people across the organization. And these are not always the usual suspects either. You want to talk to your customer service teams to get some of that data in. What are customers actually saying about the product? You want to talk to the PR folks. You want to talk to the crisis comms folks. So there's a lot of that. So that'll continue. The whole content battle will continue to be pretty provocative, but it still comes down to the basics and to some of the stuff we've talked about and that Nate was showing earlier. So we say the struggle to be relevant continues. What do we mean by that? The fireworks do get the headlines. It's tough to follow that up. It's tough to consistently deliver on whatever the fireworks were. Maybe the fireworks was a great thing like Oreo did when it was the tweet heard around the world during the Super Bowl. And then everyone, and kudos if there's anyone from Oreo in the room, my thinking was, it's a cookie, folks. You did a cool thing with a really tasty cookie, but this is not the be-all and end-all. And are you organized to do that again and again and again and again? Are you organized the right way to develop what we would now call agile content, responsive marketing? And this is a question we get. This is kind of a tough chart to see. But if you want to be agile, if you want to organize around this content, if you want to organize around getting your doing the influencer outreach the right ways, that takes a lot of process. It takes a lot of really buttoning down how you're doing things. And it also takes prioritization. So you're not going to go out and, assuming folks here don't always have outsized budgets to work with. So when you're resource constrained, it pays to look at these things. Even HP, which is not a company that cries poverty, we've done a little bit of work for, but what we found noteworthy about them was the way they organize around social and digital. And they're not just pulling through, it's not just a marketing function, it's not just a PR function, it's not just a web .com function. They're pulling this together to really organize and make it work so that when they have a campaign and they have the fireworks, who's going to attend the bonfire? That's what they organize around. So organization is important. And it gets into some of the nitty-gritty. It gets into some of the real boring stuff of the blocking and tackling in the day-to-day. But that's what it takes to really sustain this stuff over time. Again, I'm sure you all know this. On the Verizon and General Mills side, what we found, these are a couple examples of these toolboxes we made. And again, toolboxes are a great thing. But this is so they can create infographics again and again and again and again. Infographics are a great example, and I'm sure some of you feel the same pain that we've seen from time to time. They cost a lot of money to create, can cost a lot of money to create. There's a lot of back and forth. What is it going to contain? How do you source the data? Blah, 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 blah. You go on and on. How many have had infographic pain in their lives? And they're great. They're, when they're good, they're really good. When they're not good, they're really not good. But we've got folks who liked them and wanted to do them more often. So rather than go back to the well every time and say, oh, I got another infographic to do. Okay, it's going to be a 6-week process. No, we wanted to come up with a turnkey approach, more or less. So you come up with the process, and you come up with the graphics, and you get them to agree on all that up front. You say, okay, now you've got, here it is. It's your infographics toolkit. Then when it's time to source the data, you've got this ready mix and match. You're going to put them together, and zoom, bang, out you go. I think there are sites now out there, Visually and others, where you can get this done faster. So I think the point there is automate, processize, which of course is not a word, but I'll take it. Really get a lot of this going at low cost and repeatable processes, because that's going to make this sustainable. Because if it's not sustainable, then it was something that was really interesting. It was the firework. And then when we finally rounded out with content, just as not all influencers are created equal, or some are more equal than others, not all content is equal either. So in terms of the potential brand impact and the level of effort and coordination, Sharebait is pretty easy. And we talked about Sharebait earlier. It's just cool stuff you can give. You've probably got a lot of this for clients or in your company laying around, literally. Maybe you've got white papers that could be turned into good infographics, or you've got video content. You see it again and again. There's a lot of stuff sitting there that you can be using, and you can make it in these digestible chunks of pretty cool Sharebait. It won't get you too far necessarily on the brand, but it's good stuff to start building awareness out there. Then you've got your social platform content. So whether you've chosen Twitter or Facebook or whatever channel for the brand, that's coming back consistently and having these engaging experiences for people. And I won't minimize. I mean, we all know this takes time. This is not just, oh yeah, we're going to do Facebook. It does take time and effort. Then you've got the editorial content. This is where you get into blogging, and I know we're going to hear more about that later, but this is where you really get into the heart of issues. You can get into product descriptions. You can get into social responsibility. You can get into a whole lot of things here where it really can define the voice of the organization, of the brand, in a way that some of this further downstream stuff is not. And then you get into agile content, and that is actually being responsive to what's happening around you in near real time, much like Oreo was. And Oreo, that was cool, that was brilliant. It's tough to follow that up, but it was a lot of fun. And it sure as hell was memorable, and that doesn't hurt. But this takes a lot more time, and this takes a lot more sophistication. It doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot more, but what the agile content, what we're calling agile content, it's buzzwordy, but when you think of agile content, it's responsive based on the data that you're pulling through, based on your understanding of how people are sharing this content once it's out there. So if you've got your brand and you've developed this understanding of who's influential about it, what kind of content they like to share, what kind of content is most picked up. This doesn't happen overnight. This you develop kind of the muscles for over time. That gets you to the agile content aspect of it. So then what does it look like when you start to wrap it all up? You're looking at your influencer relations. This is going to be the 1 to 10. And again, take the ratios for what they are. But if you've got one person working with those 10 influencers, that's pretty manageable because you want to have these good relationships with them. You want to really develop these over time. It's like my media background. This is who are the reporters in your stable. You want 50 of them? Well, chances are 50 of them aren't really that important for the issue. Go for the 10 where you're really going to have the most impact. And that could be one person talking with them. And then you go up the chain here. So the advocates target the communities that they're in, et cetera, but you could have a person managing that accordingly. And then when you look for your enthusiasts, when you're out there on Facebook and engaging that, you could look in terms of those numbers. But where you're going to get a lot more bang for the buck, clearly, is in influencer relations. And again, it goes back to the bonfire, it goes back to the one-to-one. So with that, I encourage you to start building some bonfires and make less fireworks and have fewer fireworks. But thank you for your time. Really appreciate Sysomos having me out today too.